lose your seat? You two guys bump in. Were you bumping in?
No, I'm good. No, you're good.
Everybody good? Sorry for the last minute change.
Questions for Coach?
James, Ryan Day came out yesterday and spoke about the AQs with the 16-team playoff. Said there should be at least 4 from the Big Ten. How do you feel about that going forward?
Yeah, it's an interesting discussion with a lot of different perspectives and a lot of people that have very, very strong feelings in terms of what's in the best interest of college football, what's in the best interest of fans, what's in the best interest of the sport. And I get all of it, right? I think the challenge that we have and why I think we need a commissioner and why I think a lot of people probably agree with that, and I've stated this before, the majority of people that have strong opinions have an agenda and are biased based on what's good for them, right? And that's where, my role sitting on the AFCA board, even that's challenging. Like, we're supposed to sit in that room and take your hat off and represent football. That's hard to do for all of us, right? There's a competitive aspect of all of these things for all of us. I think the reason that the Big Ten and the SEC feel like there's an argument for more is because of a lot of the things that I've also brought up in the past of the discrepancies or things that are not even or balanced in the sport. When you have some conferences playing 9 games, some conferences playing a conference championship, some teams not in a conference, it makes it really difficult. And then the other issue you've had in the past, every conference and every team or every AD would have the same vote. Well, if we have more teams in our conference now and have a greater level of competition week in and week out, why should it be balanced? I think is the discussion that everybody's kind of having, if that makes sense. Like, again, depending on what seat you're sitting in, that's the challenge. And that's where, to me, the most important thing that can happen is all the commissioners getting together, or a commissioner of college football getting everybody together and saying, look, everybody's going to be the same. We're all going to play the same number of conference games. We're all going to play the same number of games. We're all going to play a conference championship game or not. Then I think that would help. That would help the playoff committee at the end of the year make decisions. Like somebody I think said today, well, let's just choose the best 16. Well, how do you choose the best 16? How do you choose the best 16 if you're trying to project who they are? Like, I think that people's frustration is, I think Illinois is a good example. I think people feel like Illinois is a good example from our conference that you could make the argument deserve to be in. And there's arguments from other conferences, especially after how things played out the way they did. So I guess to answer your question, I don't have as strong of an opinion of how it should be on the back end. I think the more important conversation is what can we do on the front end to make it easier for all these decisions on the back end. If not, it's going to be a constant struggle. And I guess my point is that's why I think the Big Ten and SEC are saying we should get more AQs, because it's not the same right now. Did I answer your question? Is that fair?
Yeah, you haven't said if you agreed with Ryan or not.
I guess what I'm saying is I haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking about that. I agree with the argument based off all the things that I just said. It's not even. So why should it be even on the back end who gets in when it's not even on the front end? Like, our conferences are built differently. Everybody shouldn't get the same vote. Every conference shouldn't get the same vote. A Penn State vote shouldn't be the same vote as a school X. I won't mention a school X because I don't want to disrespect anybody, but they're not the same. And the way it worked in the old NCAA structure is everybody got the same vote. All the conferences got the same vote. And I guess what I'm saying is I agree with it the way it sits right now because it's not even. But let's spend as much time as we possibly can on trying to get it consistent across the board to help with all these issues on the back end. Did I answer your question?
James, you said something at Hershey about you don't want to be transactional, but you wanted to be, I forget what the other term is.
Transformation.
Right. Can you explain why that's important in terms of roster retention and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is, right, I think the majority of people got into coaching college football, my generation, probably my generation older, got into it to be transformational on young people's lives, right? None of us, my age or older, got into this business because of money. It was about because you love the game of football and you wanted to help young people grow and mature. I worry a little bit now that because of how the sport has changed, there's people being attracted to the sport for the wrong reasons. And the way the sport has changed from a transfer portal perspective and from an NIL perspective, I think there's also young people and families that are making decisions based on a transactional experience rather than a transformational experience. So for us, we're one of a handful of programs that are still holding on to, we want it to be as transformational of an experience as possible. I think that aligns with Penn State and what our values are and how we want this program to be run. That's something that was always very important to me, but it was also very obvious to me coming to Penn State that was something that's very important to our alumni and very important to this community and very important to our lettermen. So we are fighting, scratching, clawing to balance those two things. There's an aspect that you have to embrace the evolution of college football, but you don't have to abort what your values are and how you still want it to go. And I think there's a way that you can really blend the both so that the kid, the family, the program, the university, you can still really provide a similar experience than we always have.
James, there's a few players that we saw significant roles for in 2024. We did not see them available in the spring. Andrew Rapplier, Tony Rojas, Anthony Donko. Able to share anything on whether those guys, one or all three, are going to be cleared for preseason camp and how they're coming along in the process?
Yeah, so it was Donko, Rojas, and Rapp.
Yeah.
We expect all three to be fully cleared, not just for camp, but really for the majority of the summer as well. I don't think all three of them right now are totally clear. They would have some limitations right now, but I would say if you guys came to a workout or watch, you wouldn't know, if that makes sense. But there's some modifications either in the weight room or restrictions on the field. But all of them we anticipate being full go from day one of training camp.
James, I want to go back to that playoff discussion. There's some discussion too about whether it should be a committee or more formulaic when deciding who gets in. Where do you stand on whether or not it should be this more subjective committee or it should just be a formulaic ranking or whatever, like similar to BCS?
Yeah, it's funny because I think, there's all these complaints about the BCS, right? But then we go to this, and I think it goes back to really my answer is the problem is everybody voting and everybody involved in the process, whether you want to be biased or not, we all are biased, right? So I think in a lot of ways, you could make the argument a formula could be better, but we didn't love the formula, so we went to this other system. But there's a lot of challenges, right? You got East Coast people voting on this, and they haven't watched enough of the West Coast games based on the time. All the different rankings that are out there. So there's just, in my mind, a formula makes the most sense because it takes the bias out that we all have. But I also think, maybe there's a way to kind of do both. And I guess you could make the argument they are doing both right now, because I think the committee uses some formulas to come up with it, which I think makes a ton of sense. So I think at the end of the day, there's not going to be a perfect system. But again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but I just feel like there's never going to be a perfect system on the back end. So let's try to make it as perfect as we can on the front end. So at least everybody has the ability to compare an apple to an apple.
Hey James, for your longevity here, how important has been the same longevity for Andy and Threlkel and especially Terry?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this in the past, right? Consistency within the staff is extremely valuable and less common in today's college football, than probably it was 20 years ago. So having a guy like Andy Frank, who's been with me for at least 15 years now. Andy, you're sitting in the back, is that right? 15 years. Terry's been with me, I think, 12 years, because he was the first hire that we made here at Penn State. Was not with me at Vanderbilt. And then Kevin Threlkel, I think, has been with me maybe 18 years. Kevin's been with me since he was a student at Kansas State. So that stability is important. It helps with a lot of different things. Probably efficiency being at the top of the list, because there's things that me and Andy have to talk about every day, but there's probably more things that we don't have to talk about, because I know Andy and Andy knows me, and I know how he's going to handle things, and he knows how I want things done. So there's a ton of value in that. There's just things that can go unspoken that can't go unspoken with a new staff member or a relatively, I use the word young, but not necessarily in age, but time together. So those guys are really valuable, and they're all experts in college football. They're all experts in their specific areas. They're also all really, really intelligent, and their strengths and weaknesses, and really different personalities. I mean, you would never just find Andy Frank, Terry Smith, and Kevin Threlkel all sitting at a bar downtown if there wasn't Penn State football associated with it. And that's one of the things that I love about being the head football coach at Penn State, and really just being a head football coach, is the diversity of the personalities and backgrounds and experiences that we can put together to provide the best staff in college football and resource for me and for Pat Kraft and for our players ultimately.
James, Trevor Penn committed, I think, hours before the Blue-White game. Now that he's officially signed, what went into his recruitment and what makes him a fit for this receiver room in this offense?
So I think the first thing is, right away you notice the production, right? As soon as you hear he's going into the portal, you see the production, and production matters. I think also the fact he's a 6-year guy, and I look at college football a little bit like college basketball, maybe a few years back, where I think part of a winning formula or a championship formula is also being a mature team, and there's a lot of value that comes from that. And then we got a chance to get to know him, his mom, who was awesome, and his girlfriend, and they just seemed like great fits here at Penn State. Also from the footprint, which helps, not the end all be all, but that helps. And then I'm also glad because a lot of the stuff that was put out publicly, none of it was true, you know, about how his transfer took place and why it took place, and a lot of the you know, financial descriptions of how that played out. None of those things were true as it relates to Penn State, at least based on our experience. They were non-factors. So it just worked out really well. And then since him being here, I know, you know, our veteran players like him. Like Hudson has come here and has really been a good fit, and the guys really like him. You know, I think it's also very interesting, right? A lot of the guys that we got were captains. Hudson was a captain. Pena was a captain at their previous schools. I think that's very telling, right, of how they viewed them, teammates and coaches. So that's been really good. And I guess I probably shouldn't have said none of those things were true. They weren't true based on our experience and what we dealt with in terms of what his deciding factors about coming to Penn State were.
James with Amari Campbell coming in from North Carolina. We heard your direct, indirect message to linebackers after the Blue White game. What went into the decision to bring him in, and what as a player does he bring in the program that you previously might not have?
Well, I think the first thing is, right, like, you know, I hated to lose the player we lost. Like, I think you guys know we are committed to our current roster and the retention of our current roster. Like, that is priority number one for us. We know those guys the best. We know the families the best. You know, the one of the challenges that I realize is these guys that come in with injuries, it's hard because it throws off the timeline in their head, and frustration can set in, probably some way unrealistically, right? Like, you're already behind a year, you know, coming back off injuries and things like that. So I think the first thing is that, right? You know, we're investing in our roster, and we hate to lose guys. But once that happens, then, you know, you got to move on, and then you got to find the next best option for Penn State. And again, you're talking about production. We're out of the business. We've tried a few times where you get a guy who's maybe highly regarded but hasn't proven it yet at the college level. I'm kind of out of that business. You know, I think at the end of the day, if you're going to go into the transfer portal, you need to be going to the transfer portal for production, not projection. High school's always going to be a little bit of projection. So when we were able to see his production, watch the film, talk to the family, and then again, people that I trust pounded the table for him. Tony Rojas, you guys saw it on social media, was doing it. Tony felt strongly about him being a really good fit for us. Mac Brown, who's a good friend, you know, felt like he'd be a good fit for us once he went into the portal. Jeff Collins, guys that we trust, that vouched for him. So all those things kind of helped, and so far so good. You know, sometimes it's hard to kind of evaluate a linebacker, you know, without pads on. You know, it's a little bit maybe easier to evaluate a wide receiver or something like that. So we'll see, but based on first impressions, it's been good.
James, just staying on that topic with recent commits, obviously you had Daniel Jennings sign. As far as I'm aware, he's not here yet. But I was just wondering what is the process for bringing in guys that reclassify? Why now? Is there a preference on when they come in, and is there something you saw from him coming out of high school?
No, it really had nothing to do with us. He wanted to reclass, wanted to see if it could work from a Penn State's perspective, if we had room to make it work. He was working back at home with his high school. You know, part of it, I think, is he lost his high school coach. His high school coach left. And you know, basically, you know, felt like, you know, in some ways he was ready. I think he was the player of the year in West Virginia. I think he was the #1 ranked player in the state in West Virginia. They moved him up the year before and re-ranked him, and he was the #1 player as a junior in the state. So once they wanted to do that, then it was, okay, is there a way to make this work to fulfill your responsibilities for graduation of high school from an NCAA perspective and from a Penn State perspective? And then once we realized we could check all those boxes, I said, yeah, let's do it. And I think for them, it's like, you know, what's more valuable? Even worst case scenario, playing a senior year, or worst case scenario, redshirting at Penn State. Although he's going to have the opportunity to come in and compete, I think they felt like, you know, we're going to base this decision off of worst case scenario and him being here and being in our weight program and nutrition program and you know, getting an extra year of school, you know, started ahead of time. I just think they felt like the value of it. I think the other thing is he's not like a 205-pound defensive end. Like, we've taken some kids that were 205 pounds and they had to grow into it. He's already over 250 pounds. So I think those things played a factor into it as well.
James,
But it wasn't us. It was something he wanted.
James, it was reported this morning that Max Granville's out with a long-term injury. Can you confirm that, and can you kind of evaluate that defensive end room without him?
Yeah, Max is out with a long-term injury, which, as you guys know, if it's that, I'll respond to it for you guys, just so you're not asking weekly. But I always want to clear that with the player and the parents first. He got hurt over break at home. We're working out. So obviously not an ideal situation, and my heart breaks for the kid and the family, and obviously not what we wanted or needed either. The guy that played last year, we were depending on taking that next step this year. So other guys are gonna have to step up. So we'll see how that all plays out. It's kind of early to say at this stage, but you know, between obviously Denai and Fish and Harvey and Mason Robinson and Williams and White and Kamaju, and there's some guys in that room, Burnett that was here in the spring, and then some guys that just showed up as well. You know, there'll be competition in that room, but he was a young player, but by losing him, we just got a little bit younger too, right? It is what it is at this point. In some ways, the earlier you find out, the better. So you get going on trying to speed up the maturation process of the other guys.
James,
One more, guys.
If I could follow up on Fisher, he's a guy, we saw Denai play a ton last year. We haven't seen Fish out in the field in a little while. What has he done in his return this spring, this summer, that has you feeling he's ready to cap off his career in strong fashion?
Yeah, I think internally, within our program, I think there's a lot of confidence that Fish has got a chance to have a big year. He's like one of those guys that, you know, I don't think anybody's talking about right now outside of the program, based on, you know, just not seeing him recently. But there's a lot of excitement internally with our players, with our staff. I think those things are really apparent. And again, you're talking about another older, mature guy that's had some adversity that he's had to overcome, both both from a football perspective as well as some personal stuff as well. You know, I think he's got a really bright future, and I think he's going to have a chance to have a really, really big year. You say cap it off. I think technically, I think he has 2 years left. So we'll see how all that plays out. But we're excited about you know, what he's going to be able to do for our defense this year and for our team. He is big, he is long, he's athletic. He's another one of these guys that's, you know, like a skinny 260 pounds with super long arms. We feel really good about, you know, Deny and Fish being two veteran guys. Obviously Deny with a little bit more playing experience, but I think Fish is going to surprise some people. I think, you know, I can see by the midpoint of next year there'll be a significant buzz about him.
Thank you. Thanks, Coach.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
James.
Thank you.